The Galactic Accord had kept peace among the stars for 300 years. 12 different species had signed it long ago, promising to trade fairly, protect each other, and never wage war against fellow members. Humanity had joined this great alliance only 50 years before, making them the youngest members by far. The older races saw humans as children playing at diplomacy, but they had welcomed Earth into their ranks nonetheless. Ambassador Daniel Moore stood alone in his office aboard the diplomatic station called Horizon's Edge. The room was dark except for the blue glow of multiple screens showing him images he wished he could unsee. His hands gripped the edge of his desk, so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The screen showed the Kepler 442 colony, or what was left of it. Burning habitat domes filled one screen. Bodies scattered across agricultural fields filled another. Emergency beacons flashed uselessly into the void, calling for help that had come too late. And pulling away from the devastation, clearly visible in the orbital recordings, were the distinctive curved shapes of Vethrani warships. The door behind him opened quietly. Lieutenant Katie Price stepped inside, a data tablet pressed against her chest. She was young, barely 30, with short brown hair and the kind of steady nerves that made her perfect for diplomatic work. But even she looked shaken. "The final count is in," she said softly. 14,216 confirmed dead, mostly families, agricultural workers and their children. The colony had no military presence at all. Daniel did not turn around. He kept staring at the screens, burning every image into his memory. "The Vethrani," he said. His voice was flat and calm, which Katie had learned was dangerous. "They sponsored our entry into the Accord. They called themselves our friends and allies. They guided us through every diplomatic challenge for 50 years. Yes, sir, and now they have murdered 14,000 of our people for the mineral deposits under their homes." Katie moved to stand beside him. "Their official story is that pirates attacked the colony. They claim the warship signatures were faked. The Council has already announced a 6-month investigation period before any formal accusations can be made." Daniel finally turned to look at her. His face was composed, almost peaceful, but his eyes held something cold and hard that she had never seen before. "The Vethrani have 3 seats on the Council," he said. "They have trade agreements with every major power in the Accord. The investigation will find nothing. There will be delays and complications and procedural objections. After 6 months, they will announce that the evidence is inconclusive. The matter will be quietly forgotten." "That's how it's always been done," Katie agreed reluctantly. "Yes, that is how it has always been done." Daniel walked to his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the ashes of 14,000 humans were still cooling. The elder races have perfected the art of looking the other way. They have built systems that allow the powerful to escape consequences. They call it diplomacy. They call it maintaining stability. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. There was something in it that sounded almost like anticipation. "Do you know what humans call it, Katie?" "What, sir?" "Injustice." He turned from the window and moved to his desk. His movements were quick and purposeful now, like a man who had finally made a decision after hours of doubt. "I want you to pull every record we have on the founding of the Galactic Accord. Everything about the original charter, the species who wrote it, and any provisions that have never been used." Katie frowned. "Sir, that's thousands of documents. Some of them haven't been translated into human languages. Some of them are 8,000 years old. Then you better start now." Daniel sat down and began typing rapidly on his console. "I spent 3 years studying those archives before I became ambassador. I remember reading something once, a clause written by a species called the Mathori. They died out long before humanity reached the stars, but they were brilliant lawmakers." "What kind of clause?" Daniel smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The kind that everyone forgot about because no one ever imagined someone would be desperate enough to use it. Katie hesitated at the door. "What are you planning, sir?" "I am planning to remind the galaxy that humans do things differently." He looked up from his console, and for just a moment, she saw the grief he was hiding beneath all that cold determination. 14,000 people trusted the Accord to protect them. Children went to sleep, believing they were safe because their government had powerful allies. The Vethrani betrayed that trust. They murdered that trust. His voice hardened.
And I am going to make sure they answer for it.
Not in 6 months. Not after an investigation designed to fail. Now, Katie nodded slowly. She did not fully understand what he was planning, but she recognized the look on his face. It was the same look humans had worn throughout history when they decided that enough was enough. When they stopped playing by rules designed to keep them down. I'll get the archives, she said. After she left, Daniel turned back to his screens. He forced himself to look at the images one more time. The burning domes. The scattered bodies. A child's toy lying in the ash-covered dirt. He had met some of those colonists 2 years ago during an inspection tour. He remembered a little girl who had asked him if aliens were scary. He had laughed and told her that most aliens were quite friendly. He had promised her that the Accord would keep her safe. The Vethrani had made him a liar. Daniel closed his eyes and let himself feel the full weight of his grief for exactly 60 seconds. Then he opened them again, pushed the emotion down deep where it could not cloud his judgment. Got to work. The council wanted to investigate for 6 months. The Vethrani wanted to hide behind procedure and protocol. The other races wanted to maintain their comfortable stability at any cost. None of them understood humans. None of them had read their history. They did not know about the trials at Nuremberg, where humanity had invented new laws just to punish crimes too terrible to ignore. They did not know about the long memories that humans carried. The grudges they nursed across generations, the patient fury that could wait years or decades for the right moment. The elder races thought humans were young and naive. They thought humans would accept the council's decision and move on like civilized beings. We're about to learn otherwise, Daniel. Pulled up the ancient charter documents and began. Searching for the clause he remembered. It was buried deep, written in a dead language that few bothered to study anymore. But it was there, waiting, like a loaded weapon hidden in plain sight. The Mathori had known this day would come. They had known that someday a weak species would be wronged by a powerful one, and the system would fail them. So they had built a backdoor into the Accord itself, and Daniel Moore intended to walk right through it. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and bright. The galaxy was old and vast and largely indifferent to the affairs of any single species. But tonight, in one small office, on one small station, a human being was making plans that would shake the foundations. Of 300 years of careful diplomacy, the Vethrani had betrayed the treaty. Now a human diplomat was going to deliver their judgment. The Great Assembly Hall in Nesser. Prime was the largest enclosed space ever built by any species in the galaxy. Its domed ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed inside it. Its walls were lined with the banners of 12 civilizations, each one representing billions of lives and thousands of years of history. The floor could hold 10,000 delegates, though it rarely did. Full convocations of the assembly were rare. The last one had happened over a century ago when a new sentient species had been discovered on the edge of known space. Before that, the assembly had gathered to declare war against a machine intelligence that threatened all organic life. These were matters of existential importance, the kind of events that shaped the future of the entire galaxy. No one had ever invoked the right of grievance. Hi. Minister Kethvorin of the Vethrani. Dominion received the summons while eating breakfast in his private chambers. He was a tall being, nearly 8 feet, with deep blue skin and 4 arms that marked his species as the dominant predators of their homeworld. His ancestors had conquered 3 star systems before learning that diplomacy were more profitable than war. He read the summons twice, then laughed so hard that he choked on his food. "The humans," he said to his aide, still coughing, "the humans have invoked the right of grievance against us. They are demanding a full assembly hearing." His aide, a younger Vethrani named Seth Cora, looked confused. "Is that even possible? I have never heard of this right, because no one has used it in 3,000 years. Kethvorin tossed the summons onto his table. "It is an ancient provision written by a dead species. The Mathari put it in the original charter because they believed in personal justice and honor and other foolish concepts. It allows any member race to bypass the council entirely and present their case directly to the full assembly. That sounds dangerous. It would be if the humans had any real evidence. But they are young and inexperienced. They have no idea how galactic politics actually works. Kethvorin smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. They will present their little complaint. We will present our counter-evidence. The assembly will vote in our favor because half of them depend on our trade routes. And then we will have grounds to revoke humanity's membership entirely for making false accusations. Seth Cora nodded slowly. So this is actually good for us? Very good. The humans have just handed us the excuse we needed to remove them from the Accord. Without their powerful friends, those resource-rich colonies of theirs will be much easier to acquire. 2 weeks later, Kethvorin stood in the Great Assembly Hall with 50 of his finest diplomats and legal experts. The Vethrani delegation wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the lights. They had brought gifts for key delegates and prepared counterarguments for every possible accusation. They were ready for a political battle. Daniel Moore arrived alone. He walked through the massive entrance doors wearing a simple gray suit. No ceremonial dress. No entourage of advisors. No guards or assistants. He carried only a small data tablet under his arm and moved with the calm, unhurried pace of a man taking a morning walk. Whispers rippled through the assembly. This was not how diplomatic confrontations worked. Where were his supporters? Where were his legal experts? Did the humans not understand how serious this was? Daniel took his position at the petitioner's podium, small platform at the center of the floor, where all 12 delegations could see him clearly. He stood there quietly, waiting. While hundreds of alien eyes watched him with curiosity and confusion, the Archon of the assembly floated forward. She was a being of living crystal, her body refracting the light into rainbow patterns that shifted with her emotions. Her species had been part of the Accord since its founding, and she had served as Archon for 200 years. Ambassador Moore, she said, her voice chiming like bells. You have invoked the right of grievance against the Vethrani Dominion. This is a grave accusation, one that carries significant consequences for both parties. Are you certain you wish to proceed? I am certain, Daniel said. His voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the hall's perfect acoustics. Then present your evidence. Daniel touched his tablet. Holographic displays bloomed into existence around him, filling the air with images and documents. Navigation logs from captured Vethrani ships. Communication intercepts, showing military commanders receiving orders. Metallurgical analysis proving that the weapons used on Kepler 442 were standard Vethrani military issue. And most damning of all, a recovered data core containing explicit orders from the Vethrani Defense Ministry. The orders named the target. They specified the timing. They included detailed maps of the colony's layout and population centers. They were signed by 3 members of the Vethrani High Council. The whispers died. The assembly hall became absolutely silent. Kethvorin's face had gone pale. His legal experts were frantically searching their tablets, looking for any flaw in the evidence that they could exploit. They found nothing. The evidence speaks for itself, Daniel said into the silence. 14,000 human colonists were murdered in a planned military operation. The Vethrani Dominion ordered this attack, carried it out, and then attempted to blame pirates. Every claim they have made is a lie. He paused, letting the words sink in. The evidence is not why I invoked this, right? I could have presented this information to the council. I could have pursued standard diplomatic channels. I could have waited for the official investigation to reach its predetermined conclusion. His eyes moved across the assembly, meeting the gazes of delegates from a dozen different species. I chose not to. I am not here to petition for justice. I am not here to ask for compensation or apologies or sanctions. He took a single step forward, and somehow that small movement made him seem larger. More dangerous, I am here to deliver judgment. The Archon's crystalline form flickered. Kethvorin rose to his feet, his 4 hands clenched into fists. The other delegates leaned forward in their seats, unsure what was happening but certain that something fundamental had just changed. Daniel, Moore stood alone at the center of the greatest political assembly in the galaxy. A single human facing down the combined power of civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years, and he was smiling. The smile of a man who had already won. Even if no one else knew it yet. The assembly hall remained silent for a long moment after Daniel spoke. The word judgment hung in the air like smoke, filling every corner of that vast space. Delegates looked at each other in confusion. This was not how these proceedings were supposed to work. The Archon recovered first. Her crystalline form shifted from confused purple to cautious amber. Ambassador Moore, I must correct a misunderstanding. The Assembly delivers judgment. You are here as a petitioner. You may present evidence and make arguments. But you do not have the authority to judge anyone. With great respect, Archon, I am here to remind this Assembly of something it has forgotten. Daniel stepped away from his podium and walked to the exact center of the floor. He turned slowly, making sure every delegation could see his face. The right of grievance was written by the Mathari. Does anyone here remember why they wrote it? Silence answered him. The Mathari had been extinct for 8,000 years. Their civilization had collapsed under mysterious circumstances long before humanity had even discovered fire. Few scholars studied their history anymore. Their language was dead. Their culture was forgotten. I thought not. Daniel nodded as if this was exactly what he expected. The elder races have grown comfortable. You have forgotten the principles this accord was built upon. You remember the trade agreements and the military alliances, but you have forgotten the soul of this institution. Kethforin made a sound of disgust. We do not need a history lesson from a species that has been spacefaring for barely 3 centuries. Perhaps you do. Daniel met the High Minister's eyes without flinching. Because I spent 3 years in the archives of Thesser Prime before I became ambassador, while other human diplomats were learning proper protocol and making polite conversation. I was reading everything I could find about the beings who built this alliance. He began to walk in a slow circle, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the hall. The Mathori were philosophers. They were poets and lawmakers and dreamers. They did not conquer their neighbors or build great war fleets. Instead, they studied the nature of justice itself. They asked questions that no one else bothered to ask. What happens when a powerful nation commits a crime? What happens when the system designed to punish that crime is controlled by the criminal? Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These were not comfortable questions. Mathari knew that the council would never be enough. Councils are built for consensus. They are designed to find compromise and maintain stability. But some crimes are too terrible for compromise. Some betrayals cannot be smoothed over with diplomatic language and trade concessions. Daniel stopped walking and faced the Vethrani delegation directly, so the Mathari built a back door into the accord. They created the right of grievance specifically for moments like this. When a signatory nation violates the most fundamental principles of the alliance, when the normal systems of justice are paralyzed by politics and self-interest, when the victim has no power and no voice. Kethforin stood up, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of contempt. This is theater. You are a representative of a minor species with no real influence. You have no authority to deliver judgment on anyone. The Vethrani Dominion has been part of this accord since its founding. We have shaped galactic civilization for 3,000 years. And you think you can walk into this chamber and condemn us? Yes, Daniel said simply. Because the Mathari gave me the power to do exactly that. He raised his data tablet and projected new text into the air. The words were in the ancient Mathori script, but translations appeared alongside them in every major galactic language. Article 7, Section 42 of the original Accord Charter. Shall I read it? The Archon's form had gone completely still, frozen in place like a statue of living crystal. She knew what was coming. She had read the original charter once, long ago. But she had never imagined anyone would actually invoke this provision. Daniel read the ancient words aloud. When a signatory nation betrays the fundamental trust upon which this accord is built. When evidence of this betrayal is presented to the full assembly and found to be irrefutable, the petitioner may invoke the right of final judgment. This right supersedes all other provisions of this charter. It cannot be appealed. It cannot be negotiated. The judgment is carried out immediately upon declaration. The assembly erupted in confused noise. Delegates demanded explanations from their legal advisors. The Vethrani delegation was shouting at each other in their own language. Only Daniel remained calm, standing at the center of the chaos like the eye of a storm. The right of final judgment, he continued when the noise died down, carries only one possible sentence: expulsion from the Galactic Accord, immediate and permanent. All treaties become void. All protections are revoked. All trade agreements are nullified. The offending nation is cast out of civilized society. He looked directly at Kethvorin. The Vethrani Dominion murdered 14,000 innocent people. They lied about it. They tried to blame pirates. They used their influence on the council to prevent any real investigation. And now they will face the con. Sequence that the Maethori designed for exactly this situation. Kethvoron's face had gone from pale to almost white. You cannot do this. No single species can expel another. This provision was theoretical. It was never meant to be used, and yet it exists. Daniel's voice was quiet but carried absolute certainty, written into the charter by beings far wiser than either of us. They knew this day would come. They knew that someday a powerful nation would commit an atrocity and expect to escape justice. They knew the system would fail. He smiled again, that same cold smile from before. So they created this, a weapon hidden in plain sight for 8,000 years, waiting for someone who cared enough to use it. The Archon finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. He is correct. The provision exists. The evidence is irrefutable. If the Assembly does not vote to override the declaration within 1 standard hour, the expulsion becomes permanent. For the first time since arriving on Vesser Prime, Daniel Moore allowed himself to feel hope. The trap was sprung. Now all that remained was to see whether the galaxy had enough courage to let it close. The Great Assembly Hall had seen many historic moments over 3,000 years. Treaties signed. Wars declared. New species welcomed into the galactic community. But no one present had ever witnessed anything like this. A single human diplomat had just threatened to expel one of the founding members of the Accord. And according to the Archon herself, he had the legal right to do it. Chaos erupted. Delegates shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Some demanded clarification of the ancient provision. Others called for an immediate vote to override. The Vethrani delegation had clustered around Kethvorin, their voices rising in panicked argument. And through it all, Daniel Moore stood silently at the center of the chamber, waiting. The Archon raised her crystalline arms, and a deep chime rang through the hall. The noise gradually subsided as delegates remembered where they were and forced themselves to be calm. Order, the Archon said. We will have order. Kethvorin pushed forward, his 4 arms gesturing frantically. This is madness. The Vethrani Dominion is a founding member of this accord. Our trade networks support half the economies in this chamber. Our shipping lanes connect 3 major sectors. If you expel us, you will cause economic collapse across the galaxy. Probably, Daniel agreed. His calm voice cut through the lingering tension like a blade. The transition will be difficult. Many species will suffer, including humanity. We relied on Vethrani shipping lanes more than most. Our colonies will face shortages. Our economy will take years to recover. He paused and looked around the chamber. But here is what I want each of you to understand. Humanity did not join this accord for trade benefits. We did not join for military protection or access to alien technology. We joined because we believed in it. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Belief was not a word often heard in diplomatic proceedings. We believed that civilized species could hold each other accountable. We believed that laws meant something. We believed that when a member of this alliance committed an atrocity, there would be consequences. Daniel's voice hardened. 14,000 people believed those things. Children went to sleep believing that the Accord would protect them, and the Vethrani murdered them in their beds. Kethvorin tried to speak, but Daniel continued without pause. I have heard the arguments you will make. The Vethrani are too important to punish. The evidence might be wrong. The economic consequences are too severe. We should form a committee to study the matter. We should wait for more information. We should maintain stability. He turned slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates from every species. These are the excuses the powerful always give when they want to escape justice. They are the same excuses humans have made throughout our own history. We know them well because we have used them ourselves, and we have learned through bitter experience exactly where they lead. The chamber was completely silent now. Even Kethvorin had stopped trying to interrupt. They lead to more atrocities. They lead to more powerful nations believing they can do anything without consequence. They lead to the slow death of everything this accord claims to stand for. Daniel walked toward the Vethrani delegation, stopping just a few feet from Kethvorin. You called humans children, newcomers who should be grateful for your sponsorship. Perhaps you are right. We are young by galactic standards. We have much to learn. His voice dropped, becoming almost soft. But children grow up, and sometimes they see things that adults have learned to ignore. He turned back to address the full assembly. I am not asking you to punish the Vethrani for my sake. I am asking you to decide what this accord actually means. Is it merely a trading bloc? A mutual defense pact? A club for powerful species to divide the galaxy among themselves while pretending to represent civilization? His voice rose, filling the massive chamber. Or is it what the Maithri intended? A covenant. A promise. A statement that certain lines will never be crossed, no matter how powerful the one who crosses them. He returned to the petitioner's podium and stood at attention, hands clasped behind his back. Humanity has already made our choice. We will not be part of an alliance that protects murderers. If you vote to keep the Vethrani as members, Earth and all her colonies will withdraw from the accord immediately. We will stand alone if we must. A murmur of surprise ran through the chamber. Humanity leaving would weaken the alliance significantly. Their technology was inferior to many species, but their numbers were vast, and their expansion showed no signs of slowing. But before you vote, Daniel added, I want you to remember something. Humans have long memories. We remember every kindness shown to us. We remember every debt we owe. And we remember every betrayal. His eyes moved across the assembly, pausing briefly on each delegation. We will remember who voted today. We will remember who stood with us and who stood against us. And in 50 years, or 100 years, or 1,000 years, when humanity has grown stronger than any of you imagined possible, we will still remember. It was not a threat. His voice was too calm for threats. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with absolute certainty. The Archons spoke into the silence that followed. The Assembly has one standard hour to vote on whether to override the declaration of expulsion. Each species will cast one vote. A simple majority is required to override. The clock began to count down. Kethvorin immediately moved through the chamber, approaching delegates from species who had long-standing relationships with the Vethrani. His aides spread out, making promises and veiled threats. The economic consequences were emphasized again and again. The Vethrani were too important. The disruption would be too severe. Daniel did not move from his podium. He did not lobby or argue or plead. He simply stood there, watching. While the future of galactic civilization hung in the balance, some delegates avoided his eyes. Others met his gaze and quickly looked away. A few nodded slowly, as if making decisions that they had been avoiding for a long time. The hour passed in tense silence. When the time came to vote, many delegates still looked uncertain. But one by one, they made their choices, and the galaxy began to change. The voting took exactly 17 minutes. Each delegation had already made its decision during the hour of debate, and now they simply confirmed what everyone already knew. The holographic displays above the assembly floor lit up one by one as the results came in. The Thessari voted first, their crystalline ambassador raising her arms in a gesture of affirmation. Expulsion upheld. The Karathi followed, their massive insectoid delegate clicking its mandibles in what passed for agreement among their species. Expulsion upheld. The Ven, the Magdastari, the peaceful Aloni, who had not fought a war in 10,000 years. One by one, they cast their votes. Kethvorin watched with growing horror as the numbers mounted against him. His promises had failed. His threats had been ignored. Species that had traded with the Vethrani for centuries were turning their backs on him. Without hesitation, the final count was not close. 9 species voted to uphold the expulsion. 2 abstained, unwilling to take sides, but also unwilling to defend the Vethrani. Only the Vethrani themselves voted against, and their vote did not matter. The Archon's voice rang through the chamber like a funeral bell. The vote is complete. 9 in favor of upholding, 1 against, 2 abstentions. The declaration of expulsion stands. The Vethrani Dominion is hereby removed from the Galactic Accord, effective immediately. Kethvorin stood frozen for a long moment. His face had gone beyond pale to a strange grayish color that suggested shock. Around him, his delegation was in chaos. Aides were shouting into communication devices, trying to contact their homeworld. Legal experts were still searching frantically for some loophole. Some appeal, some way to undo what had just happened. There was none. The High Minister finally found his voice. It came out harsh and broken, stripped of all the arrogance he had displayed earlier. "You will regret this," he said, looking directly at Daniel. "All of you will regret this. The Vethrani have long memories too. We will not forget this humiliation. We will not forget who did this to us." Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "Good. Remember it well. Remember that actions have consequences. Remember that even the most powerful can be held accountable." Kethvorin turned and walked toward the exit. His delegation followed in disarray, their ceremonial armor suddenly looking ridiculous rather than impressive. At the doorway, the High Minister paused and looked back at the assembly one final time. "You have chosen to side with children over civilized beings," he said. "When humanity turns on you, and they will, remember that the Vethrani tried to warn you." Then he was gone, and the massive doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. The assembly sat in stunned silence for several minutes after the Vethrani departed. What had just happened was unprecedented. A founding member of the Accord expelled. 300 years of diplomatic relationships destroyed. The galaxy would never be the same. Daniel Moore remained at the petitioner's podium. He had not moved throughout the entire voting process. Now he bowed deeply to the Archon and then to each delegation in turn. "Thank you," he said simply. "On behalf of the 14,000 who cannot speak for themselves, thank you." The Archon floated closer to him. Her crystalline form was cycling through colors he had never seen before, emotions he could not interpret. "Ambassador Moore, what you have done today was extraordinary. It was also extremely dangerous. The Vethrani will seek revenge. They still command a powerful fleet. I know. Humanity stands alone against them now. The Accord provides mutual defense, but you have made enemies of a species that has been waging war for 3,000 years. I know that too." The Archon studied him with eyes like faceted diamonds. "You are not afraid." Daniel considered the question seriously. "I am terrified," he admitted. "But some things are more important than fear. Some principles are worth dying for. Humanity learned that lesson long ago, in wars fought when we still lived on a single planet." He turned to face the remaining delegations. "I did not do this to start a war. I did not do this for revenge. I did this because justice matters. Because laws must apply to everyone, or they apply to no one. Because 14,000 innocent people deserved better than to have their deaths quietly forgotten." His voice softened. The Myathri understood this. They built the right of grievance because they knew that civilizations decay. They knew that comfort makes people forget their principles. They knew that someday someone would need to remind the galaxy what it was supposed to stand for. He smiled. And this time, it was a genuine expression. Tired, but satisfied. "I am just glad they left us the tools to do it." 3 hours later, Daniel stood alone in the empty assembly hall. The delegates had departed to deal with the political earthquake he had caused. Communications were already flying between star systems as governments scrambled to adjust to the new reality. The Vethrani were gone from the Accord. Everything had changed. Katie Price found him there, staring at the space where the Vethrani banner had hung for 3,000 years. The wall was bare now, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been gained. "Sir, the Council wants to speak with you. They are already discussing new trade agreements to fill the gaps left by the Vethrani. They want your input." Daniel nodded slowly, but did not move. "Tell them I will be available tomorrow and tonight." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion he had been suppressing for weeks. "Tonight I am going to visit the memorial site on Kepler 442. Construction has already begun. They are building a monument to the victims, a place where their names will be preserved forever." Katie stepped closer. "It is a long journey, sir. You must be exhausted. I am." Daniel finally turned to look at her. His eyes were red, and she realized that the calm, controlled diplomat she had watched dominate the assembly was just a mask over a man carrying enormous grief. But someone needs to tell those families that justice was done. Someone needs to stand at that memorial and promise the dead that their sacrifice meant something. He walked slowly toward the exit. "Some people are saying you manipulated the assembly," Katie said quietly. "They say you exploited an obscure loophole to get revenge." Daniel paused at the doorway. "Maybe I did. Maybe that is exactly what happened. I found a forgotten clause in an ancient document and used it to destroy a species that had wronged my people. Is that manipulation? Exploitation? Revenge?" He looked back at her with the ghost of a smile. "Or is it something else? Is it a young species learning to play the games of galactic politics? Is it humanity growing up and realizing that we have to fight for what we believe in, even when the odds are against us?" Katie had no answer for that. "Here's the thing about humans," Daniel continued. "We remember. Every betrayal, every broken promise, every atrocity swept under the rug by comfortable people who did not want their peace disturbed. We carry it all with us. We pass it down to our children. And when the moment comes, when everyone else is ready to move on and pretend nothing happened, we do not." He stepped through the doorway. The Myathori understood that. I think that is why they wrote that clause in the first place. They knew that someday a species would come along stubborn enough to use it. They were counting on us. They just did not know it yet. Outside the assembly hall, the twin suns of Thessar Prime were setting. The sky blazed with colors that had no names in human languages. Somewhere out there, beyond those alien stars, the word was already spreading. The story was being told and retold across 1,000 worlds. The humans had invoked a forgotten law. The humans had delivered judgment. The humans had changed everything, and the galaxy would never forget it. In the years that followed, species would study the Kepler 442 incident in their diplomatic academies. They would analyze Daniel Moore's strategy, debate his motives, and argue about whether he had been a hero or a revolutionary. The Vethrani would nurse their grudge and rebuild their strength outside the Accord. Humanity would continue to grow, expanding faster than anyone had predicted, remembering both their friends and their enemies. But on that evening, as Daniel Moore walked alone toward his ship, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that 14,000 people had been murdered, and someone had made the murderers pay. Justice had been delivered, and that was enough.